Thursday, June 12th, 2014. I'm Rym.
I'm Scott.
And this is Geeknights. Tonight, the shit that Rym and or Scott don't give shits about.
Let's do this.
Geeknights titles now with swearing.
You just started the show before I could find the news.
Well, there is big news. Apparently, OJ Simpson murdered somebody.
You don't say.
Today, I noticed multiple articles kind of popping up in all my different feeds. It was all about OJ. The Fark one probably had the best headline. Can you believe some people think that OJ actually murdered someone?
You don't say.
And I couldn't figure out why we were all talking about OJ.
Right, well, I when Rym started talking about it, I was like, why is anyone talking about OJ?
Yeah, it's like, what, did he do something new?
Then I remembered something, and that's weird because my memory is not the greatest. But it's the 20-year anniversary of OJ, and you know how I know that?
I'm really curious how you know that.
Because OJ happened during the Stanley Cup Finals in 1994, which I normally wouldn't remember. Except the Rangers were in the Stanley Cup Finals in 1994, and also in 2014, and also, I predict, in 2034. So watch out. People are going to be talking about OJ in June of 2034.
Framing OJ.
In June of 2034, OJ is going to be hot. I would buy up some OJ merchandise. Also,
you know what I've got? You know what I have?
If you buy up some OJ merchandise in 2033, you should sell it in 2044 because that'll be the 50-year anniversary.
Got to be careful, though, because sometimes those things just disappear. Like OJ might not actually be remembered by then.
Well, look, I'm telling you, if you have a bloody glove or two, you can make money on that shit.
I do have some OJ memorabilia, though. So I was at a POG convention during the trial.
Oh, you got OJ Pogs, right.
And I have two OJ Pogs. They're two slammers. One says guilty and one says innocent. They were $2 each, which was pretty cheap for a slammer at a POG convention.
I should go into the closet at my parents' house and dig out the Pogs.
Should we do a show on Pogs?
Have we?
I don't think so. You want to play Pogs? We should play. We got to play it again with our adult sensibilities before we can properly review that complex game.
It's
also
just really shitty compared to something like, say, Jungle Speed.
But there's more to it than that. I mean, Americans all played it wrong.
They didn't actually gamble?
No, they didn't use actual Pogs.
Oh, with the staple in them?
Yeah, they didn't have.
I had, because it was hard to get real Pogs. I think I had exactly one.
Yeah, you know what? You could at least bootleg them by putting staples in your American Pogs.
I have exactly one real Pog with the staple in it and one side fuzzy and everything. And you know what? That kind of staple that's in there is sort of like this perfect staple. It's not a staple that you can get from your stapler.
Yeah, but you need without any staple.
Maybe from like a staple gun at the hardware store, you can get it right.
Like the game didn't even work. Not that it was much of a game. Don't get me wrong. It just I remember the OJ era being the era where Pogs were a thing. And now thinking back, because we're talking about the anniversary, I do remember because many of you younger people today, like people who are in high school, middle school now, I don't think you understand what mass media was like when we were in middle school. There wasn't an internet that let people see news the way that we have it now. And even if you did have access to internets to see news things, you definitely could not look at that during school or anywhere other than your kitchen where your 486 was hanging out. So, and even then, only if your mom wasn't using the phone line. So the trial was pretty much the only unifying aspect of pop culture other than football and perhaps other sports at the time. So my school would give everyone an update every morning after we watched the propaganda Channel 1 news bullshit. Then the morning announcements included an update on the OJ trial.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Everybody watched the OJ trial.
The only time OJ infiltrated our school is when the verdict was declared. It got whispered around from class to class.
Wow, whispered around. I mean, I knew all about Judge Ito and his shenanigans, and he was a minor celebrity. In fact, I saw someone who was dressed up as Judge Ito. I guess they were
Halloween
cosplaying before I knew that cosplay was a thing. It was at the POG convention.
What?
That there were a bunch of people dressed up as characters from the trial.
So you got Pogs from my POG convention. The only place I ever got pogs was these temporary stands guys set up in the middle of the mall hallways, right? And also, I went to Florida once it must have been the summer of 93, 94. And we went to like a flea market, like an indoor flea market kind of place, and there were a couple stands that had I got some pogs and got some magic cards. So I must have been in 7th, 8th grade.
But anyway, because we had those TVs for that propaganda Channel 1 bullshit, and because everyone in the entire country was like obsessed with this thing. I mean, I even had a friend who had a screensaver that played the Simpsons theme and just showed a white Ford Bronco driving down the freeway.
Okay.
So it was the Midwest. What else do you do? But when the trial was nearing its conclusion and the verdict was going to be announced, the entire middle school stopped classes and put the live trial on the TVs that we had in every single classroom because we had that bullshit Channel 1 thing. So we all watched the verdict get read live, and as soon as they said not guilty, all the football bro dudes jumped up cheering and yelling and screaming about how happy they were that OJ was not guilty. Mm-hmm. And everyone who was smart was quietly dead inside.
Mm-hmm.
Ah, OJ. If you didn't do it, you really shouldn't have written a book called If I Did It, where you explain how you did it.
Listen, no one ever said OJ was smart. Okay.
Well, he was smart enough to get away with murder.
You also have to consider the fact, right? Like what
really complex murder, apparently.
Well, no, I mean, you have to consider the fact that seriously, right? What we know now about football and brain damage.
Oh, I didn't think of that angle.
Right? Like, it's like if this trial happened today, they might be going in with a defense like, look, OJ's head is basically bashed in from playing football, right? He's not in his right mind or whatever.
Well, I mean, like Chris Benoit. I mean, sports injuries can make people go crazy.
Sure.
Yeah. But still, it was a pretty complex murder plot, all things considered.
I guess so.
Oh well. OJ is what he is. And oh my God, I just saw something I never realized. The original cover for the book he wrote, If I Did It, the color of the word if is different from the rest of the words in the title. So from a distance, it just says, I did it.
Yeah, it's gonna make it easy to sell, isn't it?
I wonder what Kato Kalin's up to.
What?
I don't think you remember much about the OJ trial.
I didn't pay attention to it nearly as much as you did.
I didn't pay attention much. It was more that if you live in a place where everyone around you pays attention to a thing, you learn a lot about that thing by osmosis. Mm-hmm. I mean, think about how much you know about weird subcultures on the internet just because you encountered them tangentially. We know a lot about Homestuck kids, even though we don't read any Homestuck.
We know a lot less about Homestuck than we might think.
Yeah, but we know more than, say, grandma or anyone else over the age of 19.
Yes.
That is, in fact, true.
We know that Homestuck exists. That is a lot. And candy corn horns are a thing that is Homestuck related.
It took me a long time to realize that candy corn horns were a thing and then to figure out what they were. Kind of like how, and I'm going to admit something, I thought Slenderman was from a video game until like 6 months ago.
No, the video game that I thought there was some connection between Slenderman and that video game that people cosplayed as 2 anime Bostons ago with like the baseball bat and the white heads or whatever it was.
Oh, I could see why you would think that.
Like that French RPG or whatever the fuck that thing is.
I could see that aesthetic actually kind of fits. I could see why you would think that.
Yeah.
But I thought it was from a video game because I encountered it for the first time, of all places, on VG Cats. And VG Cats made a funny joke about it.
I think there are various games and game mods that have like put Slenderman characters in. Like I think you can play Minecraft and encounter Slenderman.
Oh, you can. Slenderman is the term for it is fakelore now. At least that's what people call that kind of stuff.
Okay.
It's the situation where someone makes up something that has the trappings of folklore, and then other people extend that until it eventually becomes Paul Bunyan.
You mean an urban legend?
Sort of, but they
already have a word for this.
They make a distinction between urban legends and fake lore in that urban legends tend to not get expanded upon and tend to survive as their core, mostly unedited over time. I mean,
I don't know about that.
The story. Look at old urban legends, like the dress that was stolen from the corpse that was filled with embalming fluid and caused the girl to die after the prom.
I've never heard that one in my life.
Really? What about the hook on the door from Makeout Point?
I've heard of Make Out Point. I don't have any hooks on any
What?
doors.
Scott, how do you not? The story is, to put it in a summary, a guy and a girl drive their car out to go make out at Make Out Point.
Got that story. So far, we're on the same page.
Yep. And there were reports that there is a deranged madman killing people with a hook hand.
I know there's a story of a deranged man killing people.
With a hook hand.
The specific detail of the hook hand is not in my mind.
Oh, do I have to read you the actual legend at this point? Hand hook a tool. No, I want the story, not the...
Miami,
no, not...
Miami
I don't
Hook
want the
Hand,
movie
television
Hook.
tropes.
I don't want the movie Hook. Blah, 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 blah.
Oh, no, it's Maine/hook hand, not Miami.
Yeah.
A TV trope of hook hand.
So... Well, I found a weird part of the internet. I'm just going to back out of where I just went.
TVtropes.com is not a weird part of the internet.
No, I got into a ghetto within TV tropes of all things that are related solely to hooks.
Yeah?
Yes.
How awesome is that?
Kind of like yesterday we looked up a Sailor Moon video, and you know what we ended up on? We ended up in a YouTube ghetto that was nothing but videos of every Sailor Scout dying.
Sweet.
Yeah. So we watched those for a while. Anyway, so they start to make out, and then they hear a rustling noise and a tap, tap, tap on the window. And the guy's like, come on, let's just keep making out. And the girl's like, no, I'm scared. Just go home. And the guy's super pissed. But then he drives her home, and then he goes home. The next morning he wakes up and he goes to his car, and oh my God, there's a hook hand embedded in the door handle. Dun, dun, dun. That's one of the most famous urban legends in modern history.
Oh, the way I know it is you go to Make Out Point. There's a psycho killer on the loose on the radio. They turn off the radio. They make out, right? They hear something while they're making out, but they ignore it. And then while they're driving home, dun, 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 guy in the backseat murders him. And then next day they find a car accident.
Stories like that don't become Paul Bunyan stories. They stay as urban legends.
I guess maybe.
Also, it's interesting that Slenderman kind of became real now that two girls actually tried to murder someone because they thought he existed.
We can make up pretty much any story and get people to murder each other.
Exactly. I just find this all interesting. Slenderman is becoming more and more real as time goes on.
Yeah, he's in the closet. Watch out.
So was that enough time for you to find some news?
I found a crappy news.
All right.
So Tesla, the people who make the electric cars, right? They're doing something that is mildly interesting, more interesting than any news at E3 at least. So whatevs. It says first, the headline was like Tesla opens patents, and I'm like, wait a minute. Patents are open, right? That's the thing with a patent as opposed to a trade secret is that people can't use your patent if it's a legit patent, right? Without paying you money. But you can just go to the patent office or even Google patents and just look at any freaking patent.
It's like the trade-off. If you want to have patent protections, you have to give up the secret.
Right. So it's like if I figure out how to cook the most delicious cookie, no one's ever cooked a cookie like this before, with some new ingredient or some shit that I invent. It's a real legitimate invention somehow. Brand new, unlike any other cookie recipe. You freeze the cookies to bake them. Freeze baking. Sure, I made it up. Okay. If I invent freeze baking and I want to patent that, so people have to pay me when they freeze bake or have freeze baking businesses. I have to tell everyone the secret of freeze baking, specifically the government, and then via the government, the entire world, the secrets of freeze baking. So we already know all the secrets of Tesla car batteries that they've told anyone. They're not secrets, really, right? But the news is they decided to be like, look, if you want to use our patents legitimately to make electric cars for reals, go for it. And it's sort of like, okay, other companies don't have the balls to do it. Good on you. Good on you. Golf clap.
Yep. Also, it kind of falls in the realm of the
really,
whole
who's going to use any of these patents? Anyone who wants to build an electric car doesn't really have the means to do so.
Well, we'll see what happens.
Who has the desire and means to use these patents that will compete with them and actually beat them in anything?
Eventually, smarter traditional car companies.
Maybe. But you know what? They'll probably just like if like Ford just looks at all these patents and starts to make Tesla cars that are better than Tesla, they'll probably just end up buying Tesla, not because this Tesla technology we have to get because we got it all in the patents, but because hey, let's not build an electric car factory. Look, there's one right there. Let's just buy it.
Man, the thing is, the thing that bothers me the most about Tesla, I mean, the technology and Tesla's a company, whatever, but it's the whole fact that one of the biggest things holding these cars back is the ancient protective laws on car dealerships that prevent car companies from just selling cars direct. I mean, if I have to buy a car again, like if we ever move out of New York and I got to, because if that happens, I got to buy a car.
Sure.
I pretty much just want to go to a website, like Toyota's website, just pick a car.
Like Amazon.
Yeah.
It's as easy as buying something on Amazon.
I want to pick a car, pick the options. Oh, look, there's the MSRP. I'll just pay that.
Yep.
I literally think negotiating and haggling over car prices is one of the most fucked things that we do as a country that we could fix but refuse to.
A good way to solve this would be maybe if car dealerships weren't so influential in their local governments.
Oh, is this a plug for Lawrence Lessig's super PAC?
I'm just saying, all problems that we complain about, most of the time, 90% of them, are really just one problem. Especially this one is definitely that one problem.
Actually, my news for the second half of the show is very relevant in relation to what you just said there.
But anyway, if you didn't know, there's... in the United States, there's a PAC, and it's basically only trying to get people elected who are not corrupt and will not, be evil and don't want to take money from corporations.
Yeah, the way they're doing it is pretty cool.
You give them money, and then they use the money to basically play the game to get people who don't want to play the game to win the game. And then if we do that enough times...
Imagine a game. Imagine if you win the Stanley Cup, you get to change a rule in hockey for the next season.
It's like Foursquare. Once you get into the ace square, you make the rules.
Yep. So if I win the Stanley Cup,
but you gotta play by the person whose rules are currently in the ace square to get into the ace square.
And I got a really fast team, I remove icings. Those just aren't a rule anymore. Anyway, so in actual news, this isn't just OJ. I just want to point this out because it's kind of amazing. There's a bunch of ads running in New York City right now, as I learned from some news articles about them.
Where are they running?
I guess TV and radio.
Oh, so that's why I haven't seen them. Because
Yeah.
I usually see subway and billboard ads because I'm in fucking Times Square.
They are trying to convince people in New York that rents are actually way too low and that if rents get raised...
Nobody will believe that who lives in New York
That
City.
if rents aren't raised, all our buildings will collapse. Because no one will take care of
only
them.
the ones owned by slumlords will collapse, and that's already been true.
Nobody would ever build a building or maintain real estate in New York if we don't significantly raise rent.
Then how come the buildings haven't collapsed yet?
Yeah, you know what? Landlords in New York City can eat a bag of dicks. I want eminent domain. I think the city should...
Well, I mean, if your building is falling apart, you know what happens? They take your building away.
Yep. Plus, let's say we had some sort of rent stabilization and we build millions of additional apartments in New York City. One, they would all still get rented because the demand for apartments is so crazy here. And
I don't know why they only fill the World Trade Center with office space. Why didn't
I can tell you why.
Why didn't they put apartments in there?
Because if there's more apartments, rents might go down.
You don't say.
And it's not like real estate in New York is not, barring global warming destroying the city or nukes destroying the city, literally the most perfect investment you could ever make. So really have zero sympathy for anyone who actually owns land here. And I think New York City should eminent domain all residential property in all of New York City and manage it. Maybe not manage it itself, but
I don't know
own it.
about that. How would you feel? How would you feel if you owned a building and were a good landlord?
Fuck you. You know why? It's New York. New York is so special and weird at this point that we can't just owning personal property.
Well, you can at least pay people for these buildings that they own.
Eminent domain means you pay them a fair market price. This would cost the city billions.
But the fair market price will suddenly be changed dramatically by the legislation that you just passed.
Would it though? Because what if you don't even change rents? Because really, the only difference is if the city owns, say, all the real estate on the Upper East Side.
You're going to fight every landlord ever in court forever over the price of each and every building forever.
Yeah, you know what?
You're gonna
fuck them. Pass some
all
state
those
constitution amendments.
All those building assessments are gonna be questioned in every single detail.
Yep, and you know what? Fuck them. Do it, because once you do it, the city could just make. Imagine if all the
That's
profits,
like building a cathedral. By the time even one building is actually eminent domain, the person who decided to do that will be dead.
Yeah, got to plan long term. But imagine that, because right now the reason I have no sympathy for these landlords is that like rental properties in New York City are ridiculously profitable. They could be a little less profitable, and it would be fine for everyone invested in this shit. So if the city
But
owned,
if I spend my whole life making enough money to buy a building, and I buy the building, I don't want to have to work anymore. I just want to live off the fact that I own this building.
yeah,
If I can't do that, why the fuck did I buy a building for?
I don't know. Fuck you. It's New York. Don't really care about you and your opinion.
But I want to own a building.
So own a building somewhere
If you
other than
someone
New York.
else, but I won't be able to just live my whole life without having to work simply by owning a building if it's not a New York building.
Well, then own something else that makes similar amounts of money somewhere else.
What else can I buy that just spits out money?
Many businesses.
But that involves putting work in. If I just own
just
a building,
buy an existing business that's already profitable.
but I have to run the business.
No, just own it. Don't run it.
There's very few businesses that you can just own without having to do anything.
Most businesses are just owned. At least most larger businesses.
You usually have to do something.
Yeah, own it. Have put up capital for it.
Only if it's like a sports team.
Managing people who then manage and do all the actual work.
That has to be a large business to just own.
Yeah. If you can afford one of these big buildings in New York, you can afford.
I'm not saying a big
you can afford to
building.
buy like IBM.
I'm not looking to own some luxury condo monstrosity like this building. I'm looking
Yeah.
to own some place that's got like 4 apartments in it.
So why don't we start with something simple? Just buy the ultra expensive, super rich residential real estate around Central Park. Have it be owned by the city.
You can't even buy a square foot.
Yeah.
Oh, you mean us buying it? I'm like, you can't afford a square foot of that property.
No, if the city own it, and then the city will just keep the rents ridiculously high, because if you're a billionaire, you'll pay whatever to live in one of those places. And then that profit just becomes revenue for the city. Bam.
We already have property tax on those properties.
It's not enough because those buildings are ridiculously profitable.
We can just raise property tax on those properties.
I have the thing is, we can't because of Cuomo.
Okay.
We can't do anything because of Cuomo. It's all state politics prevents New York City from doing anything interesting.
Just do it anyway. Send the New York police over to the building and find the landlord and be like, we are collecting taxes.
If
the
we're
state
doing
law
that, we should
says
go.
no. Well, the city law says yes. We're taking
We
your
send
money.
him over like the sheriff of Nottingham.
Exactly.
We should go one step further and just use our local police to secede from the state.
Sure.
Or just go conquer Albany.
We could probably beat the state troopers easily.
Yeah.
We got more helicopters than them, I bet.
We pay all the state troopers if we just stop sending money upstate. Things of the day. So there's a photographer named Arthur Tress, and what I'm sharing here is a small collection of photos he took. One, they're beautiful, beautiful black and white photos taken all in New York City in the 60s.
Okay.
So,
Is this
like
guy
late
live?
60s. So it looks like a desolate hellhole in most places.
It wasn't too great.
Parts of it are also taken in New Jersey. And
That's even worse.
basically, here, let me find, there's an actual description. Quote, Tess spoke with children about their dreams, often nightmares, and would then photograph them experiencing these dreams in a safe stage setting.
Okay.
So these are stage photographs of children experiencing their nightmares, and they're amazing photography.
So that kid's nightmare is
That kid's
to
nightmare
be
apparently is being trapped in a TV
while
with a
holding-
Tommy gun.
While holding a gun.
A Tommy gun, and in the background is a bunch of buildings.
Trying to figure out what buildings those are.
That looks like some place in the Bronx.
I can't tell.
That looks
It's not
Bronxy.
those aren't familiar buildings.
No, that looks Bronxy. Also,
You'd
I
be
don't,
surprised. You can look at photos of if you know New York, you can look at photos of New York from like the 1900s, and if you see like one building or a street you recognize, you'd be like, oh, I know where that is.
Yep, because a lot of that stuff has not actually changed.
Yep.
In fact, the things that change the most are just like the fashion of the people in those photos.
The cars usually.
Yep.
The roads are a lot
In the old
less
days,
wide.
people are all wearing black suits and black coats and hats.
No more
Nowadays, they're wearing black suits and black coats, but no hats.
The old picture will have street cars in it, and it'll be a lot filthier.
Yep, old enough, you'll get horses.
There's a lot of pictures you can find that overlay like the old and the new onto.
That exact thing you're talking about has been my thing of the day more than once.
Yeah. Oh, that kid's afraid of ice hockey.
I guess Jason mask hockey is pretty scary if
But
you're a goalie.
that photo was taken before Jason Voorhees existed.
Yeah, that's still scary though.
Sure.
1972.
All right.
Got thing of the day?
It's also a photo gallery.
Oh, photo time.
Yeah, so I guess there was more than one person who did this, but this is the Flickr account of the Bruce Sterling. And apparently people have been going in the Ukraine to the former, well, maybe current, depending on your interpretation, the president of Ukraine's vacant mansion. People are busting in and taking mad photos, and you can see what the life of not a rich person, but a wealthy person really looks like. Dude has a boxing ring in his house.
He has a 3D theater, like the kind of theater you'd watch movies in, but it's gigantic, but it has a grand total of 9 leather chairs in it.
Every room, like the walls and ceilings and whatever, look like an opulent museum room, of Middle Ages style with like gold foil leaf and shit everywhere. And he's got like reliefs on the walls.
Ooh, reliefs.
Of like guys, Greek dudes playing sports or whatever, and it's pretty insane. I don't even, like, no matter how rich I was, if I suddenly had all the money in the world and I was just the king of everything, I would still not live in a place anything like that.
No, but what I might live in is there's the Woolworth building. Apparently, the top, 30 floors are being turned into apartments and, condos. So
that used to be the tallest building.
From what I gather,
for a long time.
There are 30 floors being turned into condos.
30 apartments total.
34 apartments.
Oh, okay. So one floor is going to be split into 4, and the other one's 29.
Yeah, so
one each.
some of the apartments span 9 floors.
Oh, okay.
With private elevators.
Yep, that's pretty typical.
Yeah, they're selling for over $100 million.
I wouldn't even need that. I would need at most.
I would live in that 9-floor monster apartment with a whole bunch of friends.
Maybe. If I had, that would take a lot of people.
Apparently, it wouldn't take that many people.
The most I would ever need to live in would be one room for like TV stuff, right? Like to sit on a couch and watch stuff. And that room would probably have no windows. That
I would need what I primarily would need is a function space wherein I could have my own private mini gaming cons.
Sure, like a room to have, all my books and shit and sit quietly. Maybe put almost on my desk with my computer in there. A room with a bed in it and clothes and shit like that. A bathroom with a nice high quality shower.
Yep. I would have the best kitchen you'd ever seen in the world.
A kitchen with like a big fridge and a dishwasher and oven, all that stuff. Maybe lots of counter space, lots of cabinets, more than one drawer. A balcony or something like that, right? A nice roof access.
A planetarium, maybe?
No, I don't need my own planetarium.
I pretty much just need entertaining spaces.
Window with some views, a place to put bikes and shit, and, maybe building amenities like a swimming pool.
Scott, for like 15 or 20 million, you could have that in a borough other than Manhattan today.
I can have all that with like a house in the middle of, I don't know, Wyoming.
Oh yeah, so if you move to Arizona
Today.
and somehow still have income, then yes, you could have all of that pretty cheaply. So in the meta moment, the book of the book is a canticle for Leibowitz, the precursor.
I should continue reading it.
Apparently
you're going away on another business trip, right? So you'll probably read it.
Probably.
So you'll probably do it when you get back.
Yep. Well, apparently the book club book is still wool.
I didn't put it on my reminder thing.
I'm going to be in Istanbul for the first part of next week, and I'm going to be in Munich for the second part of next week, and I'll be spending a little bit of time in, it looks like Dusseldorf. So if you're in Munich, I don't know, Thursday, I pretty much have nothing to do but fuck around and hang out, and my only real goal
if you live anywhere near there, just take a train to it.
My only real goal that afternoon is to find as many copies, or at least one copy that I can do a high-res scan for, of the expansion to Hansa Teutonica.
You can't just find a scan online?
No.
Okay.
People have been looking for it.
All right.
Also, if you want to see us and a lot of other awesome people doing awesome stuff,
pretty much anyone that matters.
ConnectiCon, which is a convention that we have a big part of and that we also perform at and have been going to for a very long time. It is on its way to being the next Dragon Con. It's actually growing.
Well, it's similar to Dragon Con in that it's one of the only cons that covers all areas of
full
stuff.
spectrum geekery.
Exactly. Other than that, it's not too similar to Dragon Con.
It will be given time, simply because the space it's in is hitting limitations already. So we're starting to spread out into the rest of the city of Hartford.
That's true.
And for what it's worth, the city is like, you guys are the only thing we got. So
the city's basically vacant because no one's here in downtown except during work hours on a weekday. And you're here on a weekend, so it's a ghost town. Fill it with nerds.
So we've spread into like all the local bars and the theaters and all this stuff. I would not fly across the country or over an ocean to come to ConnectiCon.
No.
But if I lived within a day's travel of ConnectiCon, I would go to ConnectiCon.
If I could use a train, bus, or car to get to it in a reasonable amount of time, and I could afford a hotel that was within close distance and the badges, I would go to it if I didn't have a more pressing schedule conflict, which there wouldn't be many things that would be more pressing.
And like we said, it is the full spectrum of geekery. I cannot express to you the wide range of panel content at this convention.
Now that might turn you off. You might be being like, well, I only care about games, so why would I go to this con where most of it's going to be other shit I don't care about because I'm one of those branching out nerds. Well, you know what? There's enough of each thing that you can just do your one thing the whole time. If you're just like want to play fighting games or whatever, you can do that the entire time at ConnectiCon. They're having some crazy... the con chair realized that League of Legends is popular, so he's running this mega League of Legends tournament. So if League of Legends is your thing, you can go to ConnectiCon and play League of Legends pretty much the whole goddamn time and win crazy prizes and
And
shit.
if you care about things that aren't anime or video games, I point out that there are very few conventions where there's any panel content, but the panel content we've got for those things is above average compared to most fan cons as well.
Yep, so it's like no matter what your geekery is, there'll be a panel or two for you to go to.
Here, let's see. We've got Power Rangers Q&A with some people who were Power Rangers, it looks like.
Oh my god.
It's a guest thing. We've got Hell, which is basically anime hell, but anything hell.
Okay.
We've got writing fiction through the female gaze. Team 4-star, I guess if you're into that sort of thing. The early films of John Waters.
Okay.
A sculpting workshop that you actually sculpt stuff in.
That costs money though, right?
A trivial amount of money. Some Doctor Who, some Sherlock, a bunch of anime, an Adventure Time panel, a whole bunch of guests, anime directors you should know, Juggling 101, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, Manly Poses and You.
Okay.
A full-on cabaret that's 18 plus and is geeky. This is a pretty awesome con and you should be there.
All right.
So Scott, this was a Crab People episode to be sure.
Yeah, Mr. Crab.
So, you said when we were talking about what did the show
Did
on.
I say that? Let's bring up the chat log.
Oh, let's bring up the chat log.
Because that will kill time.
That will exactly. Let's see. I got to bring up the chat log, scrolling back, and let me say once again, this is the reason why I have a record of every instant messenger conversation I have ever had.
Mm-hmm.
Since the days of ICQ, I have logs of anything I have ever said to anyone or anyone has ever said to me. However, Google's historical archive search is actually not that great. Blah, blah, blah. You said I'll literally be dead before I get another chance to see the Stanley Cup. Okay, that was earlier in that conversation. Fuck all that chef puppet. What? Oh, okay.
That's later.
Yep, that's later. I'm narrowing in on where we talked about this.
I don't think we did a show about music, something.
Oh, yeah, because I thought we should do a show on music. Here we go. Scott, let's just reenact our conversation. Let's read our own lines. Starting from, okay, I'll start with Let's See Tomorrow.
I don't see a Let's See Tomorrow.
If they drop it, it's the thing I said before I said music and anime.
I don't see that either.
Music in general?
What's the date and time on it?
Wednesday at 9:31 a.m.
Wednesday is what? The 11th?
I guess.
Yesterday at 9. Doesn't this chat log not complete?
What the fuck, Scott? I can read all of our lines. All right, I'll read them all then, I guess, because you don't keep archives.
I do. I'm using Google Hangout.
So am I.
It's stored in the cloud.
Yeah, look right here. Here's our timeline. Here's the conversation we had.
Let me compare.
Look at that right there. Let's see tomorrow. If they drop before the game, we're talking about ticket prices to a Stanley Cup game, we should just go. Otherwise, Geeknights. And then Scott said...
All right, I found that same part.
Okay, I was
All right.
about to do your voice in a really stupid and derpy way to annoy you.
All right, then you do my voice and I'll do your voice.
Oh. Yeah, if we can't get them at a reasonable price before work is over, it's not worth it. What's our show tomorrow?
The music in the A9? Did we ever do show on that?
Tomorrow is Thursday.
Music in general? Eric Cantor? Quote tenue?
Who on the what?
Like how we get news. How is Babby formed?
I didn't say that.
All right.
So I suggested we should do a show on the news, like how we get news, how we care, like what news do we care about, what is and isn't news, that kind of stuff. And then I kind of subtext there. I kind of exclaim, I'm reaching for a topic. And then Scott says, and I quote, I can come up with some topics that you have nothing to say about.
Yep.
And that is now the topic of the show. Do we do a showdown? Spelled show down.
You're gonna call it something corny because that's your corny style anyway. So I can't really stop you, cornball
I
man.
think that's the name of the episode.
Sure. Anyway, so yeah, it's like there's lately there's been a lot of geekeries I've been doing. Rym's not doing.
Well, lately Scott decided that he hates German board games and hates video games and doesn't like to play any of them anymore.
I just don't play them that often.
Ever. When was the last German board game you played?
Hansa Teutonica.
When was that?
When we played it at Scott Johnson's house?
Yeah, at a party.
Yeah.
Yeah. When was the last German game you played before that party?
What's that convention we went to? ZenkaiCon?
So ZenkaiCon.
That wasn't too long ago. That was
Yep.
still summer.
Yeah, that was still summer is not how I would.
Does Netrunner count?
Is it German?
No.
I said specifically German games. We did a panel called German Board Games at ConnectiCon in like 2006.
Sure.
So you said you could come up with topics I have nothing to say about.
Oh, so I should do that?
Yeah, what's your topic?
All right, let's talk about Gundam models that you don't build and have no interest in.
I was really into models as a kid, and I was always really bad at them.
Did you
And
build I'm Gundam models specifically.
yeah,
Do you even know anything about them?
I know. Well, so one, I know there's different grades of them.
Do you know? Can you name any grade or know what the difference between any of them is?
So you're just giving me the fake nerd test.
Yes.
But I can talk about the hobby.
How can you talk about it when you don't even know the first thing about
Well,
it?
let's see. So what would you say about it? Because this is the topic that you would do a show on.
I could talk about the different
Well,
grades and the
do it.
differences between them.
Do it.
Okay, so Gundam models, right?
Yeah.
Well, first of all, we got to start every topic the way Geeknights do.
All right.
Anecdote style.
Oh my God. So I actually bought a Gundam model from the second Otakon that I went to.
Did.
Yes. And I sat in a box. I never built it. And then I eventually lost the box.
So you've never built one in your life?
I've never built I did build the Gundam model that came with a new type that Emily bought once.
Okay.
Well, I
Emily
started
says
to
you didn't.
Yeah, so I started to build it, and then I lost a bunch of the pieces, and then I lost.
Okay, so I started Gundam models started to try to come into the US like in the Toonami era, and they had them in like the stores here for reals, and they were like easy, medium, and hard levels, and they didn't actually tell you the grades.
Well.
And they were like these Americanized versions. I never built them, but you know who built those?
Tom.
Ian Harris built those.
Oh.
Yeah.
So did Tom.
Like the first time I ever saw anyone actually building one was like I was at Ian's house and he had one that was like half built, and I was like, whoa, people actually do those things? Whatever. And then it wasn't until I actually saw Gundam Seed and liked it that I had any interest in actually building or buying any of those things.
I think of all the Gundam designs, those are actually my favorites.
Well, because when you like a Gundam show, you tend to like the Gundams from that.
Yeah, but I
Gundam
like
that
the
you
style
watch.
of those, like the way the wingy things were on the two important Gundams toward the end.
Anyway,
The
so
winglings.
at Otakon, was it Otakon 02 or 03? The first Otakon after Gundam Seed came out, right?
I think that was 03.
It was early, really early. I bought the Freedom Gundam model that was on sale there for like $40, which is way too much money for that model. But that's what you're paying when you don't know better, and it's Otakon, right? And I built it. And I built it not knowing the first clue of how to build these things. And I did a bunch of stupid shit. And that
You didn't use the paint markers?
I didn't even have the paint markers.
Did you just tore them out of those little the
I-
structures so they had flash all over them?
Right, so I went to like the regular old hobby store and I bought like Test Store's paint or whatever. Like and I tried to make the right colors, and then I tried to use a brush and just paint it on there, and it's like, nope, that And as soon as I realized that wasn't going to go well, I stopped. And I have all those paints still, but they're probably dried out. Well, they've been sealed. Maybe they're not dried out. But since then, I was like, not trying to paint any of these things because that does not go well. Don't ask me about painting. All I know about painting is if you want to do it easily and amazingly, you need an airbrush with a compressor, and you basically mix the good paint with some thinner, put it in the airbrush, and you spray primer on all the pieces. You put the pieces on sticks, and then you spray paint the real paint on them afterwards.
So I do, in fact, have a very relevant anecdote related to Gundam models. Yeah. Do you recall, you were talking about how they're trying to push into the U.S. There was an anime store.
It failed, by the way.
There was an anime store that we would hang out in when we lived up in Beacon years ago.
And then there was the ghetto one that was in the good mall. That
was there was a ghetto one. It was a good one in a ghetto mall, and then a ghetto one in a real mall. It was a store that had no business being in a real mall.
Yep.
And basically, this store, we're walking through the mall, the real mall, the normal mall, not the weird mall, and we see a store, and we're like, that looks like a bunch of anime and Gundam models.
It was.
The fuck?
It was all bootleg crazy
next to a Gap or whatever. So we go in there, and the guy sells two things. He sells legit, for real Gundam models, and he is super into them and knowledgeable about them because we met the owner.
For way too much money, though.
And he sold straight up just DVD-R bootleg anime.
Yep. He downloaded from the internet, put it on a DVD, printed DVD case.
Yeah, and he didn't even lie about it. I was like, this is a bootleg. And he was like, no shit. And I was like, that's illegal, right? And he was like, no one cares.
He was right.
He was really adversarial about us pointing out that everything in his store was bootleg except the Gundams.
Yep.
So the fact that store existed.
It's hard to bootleg Gundams.
Yeah, it is. I'm sure there's bootleg Gundams out there.
Yeah.
I'm going to look for them.
So anyway, so what I ended up doing was, people don't know this, you buy Japanese Gundams.
Bootleg Gundams for sale in the mall. Whole rack of them.
Yep.
Oh, no, they look legit, but they're bootleg.
Okay. I'm surprised. What factory is making those?
Wow. Looks like Chinese factories are just making knockoffs of the legit ones.
I'm surprised they don't just fall apart or whatever.
The brand of all of these bootlegs is Hong Li, and they sell them for about 2,300 yen.
All right, that's about some Gundams.
Oh, that's the 1/100 scales.
Yeah, okay, so let's talk about scales, right? So the first Gundam I ever bought was a Freedom Gundam, and only later did I realize that is a 1/100 no grade. So no grade is pretty much just
You are the no grade hero?
Yeah, it's it's a fucking Gundam, build it. It's really simple, right? It's and you can build any Gundam no matter how complicated with just the instructions, even if you read no Japanese whatsoever. It's like Lego instructions. There is no language required. There's some Japanese characters for the decals, but you just match the symbols. You don't need to know what the fuck symbol it is, right? You really don't need to read it all. And some of them even have translations online if there's a complicated bit, which is pretty rare. So don't be afraid to buy any model from any country, because if it's a legit one, you can do it, right? So the no grade is really simple. There's no details on it. There's no small pieces. It's lots of big pieces that go together really easily. If you just put it together, you can put it together really fast. As easy as you can put together Legos, right? So the grades they have today that matter is no grade, right? They have HG, which is 1/144. So 144 is actually smaller, right? Which means if you increased its size by 144 times, it would be the same size as a Gundam in the anime. I don't know how they measure that, but I guess they do, right? So those are actually the ones I like more now because they're sort of tasteful. The 1/100 ones are kind of big and sort of garish. And then they have 1/60th, which are gigantic and ugly and really should only be displayed.
Now you're getting into why I pretty much never, I always nominally had an interest in models. I would make a lot of non-Gundam models for much of my young life.
Yep.
But I was never proficient enough at it where they would look they wouldn't look good enough to where I would display them prominently. And as I'm older, I don't want to have anything I need to display prominently. I don't want physical goods. The Gundam models in New York would be a disaster as a hobby for me.
Yeah, the thing with Gundam models is it's I really don't care about displaying them that much either. I just sort of put them on my dresser, all whatever, not trying to pose them or anything. It's just way fun to build them. You know, it's
Yep.
it's like putting together Legos is the good part. Then if you just have Legos sitting there, it's like that's boring as fuck. You want to smash them and build it again, or build something else.
I think the way to really make that an interesting hobby again would be to make ultra high quality ones and then pose them into sort of diorama and do different kinds of photography with it.
Sure, you can do that. Lots of people do that. So this HG, which is the smaller ones, right? And they're just about as easy to build as whatever. They're just small and tasteful and cheap and easy. So that's a good place to go. But then there's the master grade. Master grade is like the fanciest, right? It's the 1/100 size, so it's bigger, right? But everything is super detailed. You've got and some of them even have crazy shit like LED lights, or they have like an internal skeleton and then armor on it, and it gets crazy, right? That's like the most popular one is the master grade. Ooh, masters. Then there's the perfect grade, which is even crazier. It's usually even bigger than master grade, and it costs like $1 zillion to get one of them, and it comes in a ginormous box, and it's just the insanity of Gundam. Like, building one hand will take you all day or whatever. I've never even bothered to even care about any of those because I'm not spending that kind of money on a model like that ever in my whole life. All right?
All right. So we've proven, because the show's not about Gundams,
that you have nothing to say about this.
I had plenty to say.
Uh-huh.
All right. We'll let the listener be the judge of that.
Sure.
So on my side, Scott claims to not care about politics at all, despite bringing up Lawrence Lessig's super PAC in the earlier part of the show.
There's no point in caring about anything else as long as everything's corrupt as fuck.
Nah. Well,
So,
the greatest thing I can say about that super PAC is that Scott here actually donated money to it.
Well, I mean, it's the only chance we have to do anything ever. So
the other night, I was hanging out, online. It was before bedtime, and the news went apeshit. Or at least the news that I follow went apeshit.
Okay.
Because Eric Cantor, do you know who that is?
No clue.
He's the House Majority Leader, so he is in charge of the Republican Party in the House.
Isn't the Speaker of the House in charge of the
Nope,
Republican
the
Party
Speaker
in
of the House is in charge of the House.
But the Speaker of the House is a Republican.
Yeah.
So wouldn't the Speaker of the House, who happens to be a Republican, also be in charge of the Republicans?
You
in the
don't know
House?
how political parties are structured, do you?
Why do you need? What is this other person's responsibilities?
Do you know what? Have you ever heard of the majority or minority whip?
Yeah, that's usually why I thought that's when you're not in charge.
What does
right?
the whip do, Scott?
So it's like if you're the Democrats, you don't have the House seat right now because you're not in the majority, but you still need someone to sort of be in charge of your party.
What? So you think the minority whip is in charge of the Democratic Party in the House?
Yeah, that's like you need someone to lead you and tell
Yeah, a minority leader,
Some sort
which
of
is
leadership.
separate from the minority whip.
What?
Yeah, so it's hard to have an opinion on politics if you don't know anything about it. Anyway, so he is...
This is why we should just ban political parties. After we get rid of corrupt money in politics, you just get rid of parties.
Yeah, there are arguments against removing
George
parties.
Washington said we shouldn't, so...
Yes, however, here's the argument that's usually given against removing parties.
Well, I mean, in the kind of government that we have, parties will form no matter what we have.
No, they wouldn't, because the reason parties are so powerful is because the electoral system supports them by kind of defaulting in the large parties into all the national debates and everything, and letting them control the debates, and giving them official recognition, and letting them use our voting system to do their primaries. Imagine if the Republicans had to do their own primary on their fucking own with no help from the government at all. That is why we have parties the way we do. But if we didn't have parties, then individual people would have to become individually popular. And in that case, the argument is that it's too easy to have a government solely of attractive people, ideologues, demagogues, people who individually can form cults of personality around themselves.
Now, there are clear problems with that, but I don't see how that's much worse than what we have now.
No? I kind of like the more
I think that would
parliamentary
actually
system.
be a slight improvement.
We could go to the mix and match party system where, like, you have a party that cares about these three things. There's 10 other parties, and you form a coalition. So you can form a coalition that's pro-gun, anti-abortion, anti-religion,
You mean what Israel does?
pro-socialism. But
That's how Israel works. It's not good.
that's how Europe works, and right wings are coming up in there. So anyway,
But also the Pirate Party has seats.
Yeah?
So
yeah, I'm thinking enlightened despotism is really the only way forward. But anyway,
I got dibs.
so Eric Cantor, he's an important person. He wields power within the Republican Party, And he, like most other Republicans, was challenged from the right in his primary.
By some nutjob Tea Party person?
Yes. I mean, Mitch McConnell, all these people, the whole Republican Party is being pushed to the right because every time there's a primary now, someone way to the right, whoever is currently in office and currently running for the incumbency, and will challenge them. So if the person who's already in...
Those people used to just run on some other party.
Yeah,
right?
or does not run
like
or
the
not
Constitution
exist.
Party or something.
So now... the Republican guy might be like, I'm against amnesty, but for immigration reform.
Amnesty for who and what situation?
Immigrants.
Oh, yeah.
In a general sense.
Okay.
Amnesty is just the term being used for that issue.
Okay.
So then the right will come in and say, we shouldn't let anyone immigrate here. My opponent, a far leftist, wants to let immigrants come in and ruin everything.
You mean like your grandparents?
Oh,
are you a Native American Republican? Because I don't think there's too many of those.
yeah, so I guess that thing, that strategy works pretty well.
Probably, but yeah.
So these crazy Tea Party challenges within the Republican Party, by and large, failed. And no one expected Eric Cantor to lose his primary.
They failed because I think at a primary, the only people who show up are crazies. So then the crazies would vote for crazies.
But the Republican money is funding the establishment Republicans because they at least are not stupid enough to think that those crazy people should actually be in office.
But money can influence the general population in the real election. But in a primary, it's just the crazies who show up. You can't really influence them as much with money.
So money historically,
and especially in a non-presidential primary year like this.
So money historically has always been enough to control the primaries. Upsets in primaries are pretty much unheard of in Republican land.
How do you influence people with money in a primary? Hardly anyone's there. It's like 10 people.
You run ads, and two, you run
those
ads.
10 people are seeing those ads?
You run ads to target people who normally wouldn't vote in those primaries and get them to join the primaries.
So those ads are only on during the Price is Right, early morning.
But anyway,
CBS.
a whole bunch of crazy things happen. So Eric Cantor, who was the shoe-in, who was expected to run, he wasn't even really campaigning much. He was in D.C. because he's just doing like national party Republican stuff. This nobody from nowhere ran, David Bratt.
Okay.
And he pretty much ran
Is his last name really Bratt? He must have had a hard time in school.
He pretty much ran on an anti-immigration policy and not much else. He had $500,000, if that, in his campaign
That's a lot
chest.
of fucking money.
That's zero money.
Gave me yeah, but I mean, if I had $500,000, why would I want to become a congressman when I could just live with $500,000?
Eric Cantor spent $5 million on the primary campaign alone.
Because it's a corrupt government, whatever.
Yep. And somehow...
Why doesn't he quit government and go live with his $5 million? Oh, that's what he's going to do in like 4 years.
So basically, he was acting as though...
because he lost, right?
He was acting as though he's just going to be in office. The entire Republican Party was acting as though he's going to win the primary and he's going to win the election because the district he's in is so heavily Republican, the Democrat has zero chance.
Where is this?
It's the 7th district in Virginia.
All right, never moving there.
So it gets really interesting here because Eric Cantor helped put forth the gerrymandering that happened after the last census.
Oh, so he fucked up his gerrymandering?
To make these Frankenstein districts that are so Republican, they're invincible. That's the only reason the Republicans control the House. You realize in the last election, the Democrats won the majority of the popular vote in House elections, but yet they lost the majority of the actual body because of gerrymandered districts.
Yep.
So this Frankenstein district is like plus 12 to plus 15 points Republican, meaning by default, Republicans get an extra like 12 points above a Democrat, regardless of all other factors.
It's like, oh, the only people who live in this district are like Hicks on farms.
The polls that the Republicans commissioned
no cities here
to track this district.
Does he actually live in that area?
Technically.
Or does he nominally own a house on like a farm somewhere?
He lives there by all laws that require him to live there to the letter of said laws. So, one thing led to another. The Republicans were polling in the district. They realized that Eric was going to win by a shoo-in, so they spent proportionate amounts of money. They were aiming mostly at the general election. It turned out the polls were 100% wrong.
Wait, why would they aim at the general election they're guaranteed to win?
Because they used that election to ensure, like, if they don't want to mess it up for one. They don't want, like, something crazy to happen and Democrat
Sure, but it's
to
like
win.
if you have plus 15 points, like whoever the Republican is in this district will win. then the primary becomes more important because...
And two, in the general election, they'll do spillover ads where they can use money nominally aiming at one person that's earmarked for one person, but they get this sort of splash effect of they're also just promoting the Republican ticket as a whole, Republican issues in the state.
So the corruption part.
Yeah, lots of corruption.
Yeah.
So this guy came out of nowhere, spent almost no money, and won by a lot.
Did he just get like all his friends from like one small town in the district to show up?
So what happened?
And that's enough because it's just
no
the
one
primary
really
and there's only like 100 people can tip it?
So actually, no. So blah, 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 blah. The number of registered voters in the district was 512,000 people.
Okay. How many voted in the primary?
The population is 750,000 people. 130,000 people voted for this upstart.
Whoa. How does that even happen?
Yeah, so they have open primaries, meaning you don't have to be registered in a party to vote in the primary.
Oh, shit.
But there's no evidence that Democrats did what I tried to do in New York.
You know why there's no evidence of that? Because Democrats don't live there in the weird-ass district.
So basically,
specifically shaped so that they don't live there.
All the Tea Party crazies in this Frankenstein district saw Eric Cantor as a left-wing radical. They saw him as being too mainstream, too liberal.
And they voted for Nutjob.
And they voted for someone who speaks to their conscience. And what this district proved, which is kind of crazy, is that if a politician has a message that actually for real resonates with the people who actually vote in the area, that can overpower money.
Sure.
That really hasn't happened in recent history. And the fact that it happened, basically the Republican Party is like a hornet's nest that just got poked with a stick.
Well, who was managing this dude's campaign? Like some really genius PR
No.
person? Like the Robert Koo of PR?
No, this guy got interviewed now, and it was a Sarah Palin situation. Like, he doesn't know shit about shit. And no one knows anything about this guy.
Then how
And-
did he get his name out in that district? What did he spend his $500,000 on?
Oh, so he went around talking to people and going to Tea Party rallies, and all the AM radio conservative, like radio crazies were talking about it.
He was just on AM radio all the time.
Yeah, and FM radio and local conservative TV shows.
Why don't we lie and pretend to be crazies, get people to talk to us about it on the AM radio, and get elected, and then be like, oh, sorry, I wasn't crazy, just kidding.
It's not a bad idea.
What you gonna do now?
So the Republicans are going crazy because now like their whole structure is fucked and they don't know what to do about it. And the Democrats are like, we might win that election now.
Well, I don't know, right? I mean, if it's a Frankenstein district, right?
Yep.
And the Democrats didn't vote for the crazy,
Yep.
there probably aren't any Democrats there.
So the things that could happen.
You think that you think the normal Republicans there will just all those 400,000 registered people who didn't even vote in the primary will vote Democrat now because the Republican primary person's a crazy?
There are a few possibilities. The least likely one is that Eric Cantor will run in the general election anyway.
You can do that.
By law, it would have to be a write-in campaign.
Really? I thought it's just is it a
You
law
can't just
or is
run.
it just a rule of their party?
Well, for the actual election, you can't be listed as Republican.
I mean, there's nothing in the law about political parties like that.
You don't get
the Republican
Scott. You
Party
realize
can just make its own rules.
you realize you don't get on the ballot unless you meet certain requirements.
I thought it was just like signatures or whatever.
Yeah. So if you're not the Republican nominee, then you need your own way to get on the ballot
Right,
without
but the
Republican Party doing
makes
it
the
for
rules
you.
of the Republican Party. They can just write a rule like a bylaw and be like, yeah, you know what? In that district, primaries don't count. Whatever. Fuck you.
If they did something like that, there would probably be a legal challenge saying that would only apply to the next election.
Yeah.
And more importantly, the Tea Party people, that would be like if Obama said, I'm taking away all the white people's guns. The Tea Party people would probably actually pull out weapons and go crazy if that happened.
Awesome.
And so if he runs as a write-in campaign, then basically the Republicans will split the vote and the Democrat will win. So he's probably not going to do that.
He'd rather have the crazy person than a Democrat?
The Republicans would, because this is what this is all getting down to. We've gotten to a point to where local elections in places, like this is just the 7th House District of Virginia.
Yep.
Yet the entire nation was pumping money into this and involved in this because all that actually matters is the number of seats your party has in the national house. in the National Senate.
This is what we had to solve. The election in Virginia should only be, right, at least it was intended to be, for Virginians and what the fuck they care about in Virginia, right? Know what anyone else thinks who doesn't live in wherever this is in Virginia should have nothing to do with it, should have no say, should have no input whatsoever, right? And back in the days before telephones existed, that's pretty much how it was, because even if you were mad rich or some shit, you couldn't really do anything. What are you going to do, send your newspapers to the middle of nowhere in Virginia? No.
But at the same time, because these are people who are representing their state in the national congresses, arguably many of the issues the U.S. is facing are in fact national issues. And if you want to influence those issues, you've got to influence those, the House and the Senate.
Right,
Nothing else
you
matters.
influence them you're supposed to, right, on paper at least.
By your votes.
Influence those issues by the person who's from where you are.
Well, by voting.
Your representative, not anyone else's representative.
But that's covered.
Your representative represents you.
That's covered.
The
My
other
representative.
You just don't give a fuck because they're not representing you. They don't give a shit what you say.
My representative represents me because I vote in those elections.
Yep.
And then independently, I have free speech, so I can just talk about other people in other places. I can endorse someone in Virginia.
Sure, but it wasn't intended to be that way, and technology has fucked it up and made it impossible not to be that way.
How do we know it wasn't intended to be that way? How do we?
It wasn't really intended. It was more that it was impossible for it to be any other way because you couldn't communicate.
I don't think
over
most
such
things
great
were
distances.
intended by the founding fathers. The founding fathers, I imagine that document.
No,
was
they made a system under the. It wasn't an intention like, we don't want people. They didn't say that or think that, right? It was simply that they made rules that worked given the reality of the world at the time in which they made the rules, and the world has changed and the rules have not changed. So of course the rules are now fucked up because the world is not the same as it was in whatever.
Mechanism design. The rules of the game are controlled by the people who have a vested interest in how the game turns out nowadays.
Right. So it's like if I invent, let's say like the rules of poker, right? You don't see other people's hands. Well, yeah, that's going to stop working, the rules of poker, once I get Ghost in the Shell X-ray eyes. Suddenly we're going to have to change poker, aren't we? Right? So we're now in a time period where everyone has fucking X-ray eyes and can communicate with the people in the middle of nowhere, Virginia, and send them money, all right, and bribe them, whatever the hell else they're going to do, right? But the rule still said, the rule was made in a time when that was not possible.
Wow, you said a lot of words for not having anything to say about this.
Yeah, but I only talked about one thing, which is shit is corrupt as fuck, which is the only thing that matters.
Yeah,
you keep worrying about like all these other things that don't affect your life in any way whatsoever, that you have no influence on, right? And
Scott, who says I worry about them?
Well,
I'm just informed about them.
Why? What does it even matter?
Well, for one,
you could fill that space in your brain with something actually useful that could change your everyday life.
If you look at the game of politics, it's an amazing game, and I enjoy it the same way I enjoy football. In fact, I enjoy it more than I enjoy football.
But football can affect your life, and you can influence football more than you can influence politics. And football can have a more immediate effect on your life.
I have money. I can influence politics more than I can influence football.
I can influence football a lot by going to the stadium and yelling.
I have a feeling I could influence politics more.
Also, football, if things happen, I can get a parade, which is a lot more than politics ever gets you.
Scott, we get parades for politics all the time.
Those are shitty-ass parades. You might as well. That's a bad parade. That's a parade that blocks me from going to work, not a parade that I go to on purpose. That's a negative thing.
All right, kids. See you in a week. This has been Geeknights with Rym and Scott. Special thanks to DJ Pretzel for the opening music, Kat Lee for web design, and Brando K for the logos.
Be sure to visit our website at frontrowcrew.com for show notes, discussion, news, and more.
Remember, Geeknights is not one, but 4 different shows. Sci-Tech Mondays, Gaming Tuesdays, Anime Comic Wednesdays, and Indiscriminate Thursdays.
Geeknights is distributed under a Creative Commons Attribution 3.0 license. Geeknights is recorded live with no studio and no audience. But unlike those other late shows, it's actually recorded at night.
Ladies and gentlemen,